The new Surpass Rocket version 4 for 2018/2019 has just come out, and it's obviously an update on the previous version 3. But what have they done? Well, it's interesting that Surpass make quite a lot of motors for other manufacturers, so they obviously know what people are asking for and what works and what doesn't work, so they should be well ahead of the game when they're making their own motors. Now briefly, the Surpass version 3 was a very good motor, and also another thing about it is that they're cheaper than most other motors because they don't go through a lot of middle companies. They come direct from the factory, so they're pretty cheap. Now this was the version 3. A bit old-fashioned in some ways, not much cooling holes, but it had a very good stator, state-of-the-art stator, and nice tight winding with no plastic or anything making the wires longer than they need to be. And it was a good motor, nice strong rotor. So that was the version 3. Now the version 4. Unusually, there are two versions of the version 4. There's one in this box which is a red and black finish. We'll look at that in a second. And one that comes in the same sort of cardboard box as the previous ones, which is a gold and black finish. Now I'm going to just have a look at both of them and see if there's any difference. So this is the gold one. I've got 17.5 and 13.5s here. These are the ones that are critical in racing. They've got to perform really well because, especially in Blinky class, you need everything to work better than anyone else's in performance. And the 17.5 Blinky classes, any differences in the motors or improvements really show up in lap times. So here's the red ones. They come in now in a plastic box, same sort of foam inserts, and let's just look at them side by side. Gold finish and red finish. You can see that the holes are all the same, but there are a couple of differences when we look closer. I'm just going to do that in a second. Besides the writing that's on them, legends, there are some differences. Now the gold ones look like they might have been made a little earlier. They've got slight rusting on the Stator for some reason, but these are nice and shiny. Tags, everything the same, but there's a couple of things I noticed straight away that are different. The front has been recessed better on this one. This actually recessing, which catches on the top deck on some cars, than this one. It's noticeably different. And also I noticed that the shaft sticks out further on the gold one and the red one, but although you can't read the writing on them, they've both got the same code written on there, which says C75125. They both say the same, and putting the motor side by side, the same length. So I'm assuming, I look through the holes here and you can see the end of the magnet. It's further away on this one from the sensor board than on this one, so they've changed the shimming, and that's a good thing because these, on some cars now where the motors move very closely in, the end of the shaft has been pressing onto the batteries, which are very close now, the LiPo, pressing on the case. So the shorter shaft is a real bonus. Now, any other changes? Yeah, there's a huge change at the front here. Looking at the front, the collector here, which for the 3 wires, 3 different windings joined at the front on this ring. This one is a fairly small diameter brass with a very large plastic or paper insulator behind it, which makes it look bigger than it is. And that's a sort of little brass ring. This one is much bigger, and it's very thick as well. Just reminds me of the R1, which has a very thick collector at the front. It's full diameter and thick there. low resistance, of course, and I don't know about the material. It looks brassy coloured from the side. Anyway, that is a big difference. Otherwise, a few other small changes. They still both use aluminium screws for holding the case together, which is a bonus. You don't have to buy them. Some manufacturers charge you quite a lot extra for them. This one has aluminium screws for the end bell. They're only 1.5, and so I'm not keen on that because you can round these out quite easy. Some manufacturers, like I want to gone to a 2mm, which is much better, 2mm hex. They could have done it on this. I think they missed a trick there. This one, though, I think it's gone back to steel, which is much better, less likely to round them out. So that's an improvement on the red one. There are two sensor inputs, one at the top, one at the back, which is fantastic for different cars, especially pan cars and that, because it's awkward sometimes to get it in the back. They come with little rubber covers, which you don't really need indoors, but I suppose outdoor and off-road is something that would be useful. Now these little rubber covers on the red one are nicely held by, it fits, it's got a little extension with a plug on it, it fits in a hole, so if you pull it out it doesn't actually fall off the motor, which is great. This one does come with the rubber covers, but they're just in the box somewhere, and they just push in, and then when you take them off they're loose, so you can lose them. Just a small point there. You can see the excellent stapling on the back that holds these tags really from moving about when you're soldering them, and there's a decent gap between them as well. Some, again, are very close together, and it's very easy when you're not very good at soldering and the wires are fat, to get the soldering between them and short them out, and that it becomes frustrating. So that's nice. The writing on them, well, there is legend all over them. It varies. V4S on this one, V4. That says stock spec. Now the winding, 17.5 engraved on that one sideways. This one's got 17.5 engraved that way. Stack length, well, I can measure that, but by eye I would say they're the same. I'm going to measure the weight in a minute. A different design of case, by the way, from the earlier model, and this one had a substantial big front end bell part here, really solid, that screwed on the front, and the back came off in the middle. They've now gone to two-piece. It slides, all this front piece slides all the way down to a join there, and it's probably lighter, much lighter in weight. The front doesn't have to be quite so substantial. Maybe it's easier to manufacture, not sure. So externally I can do a few more checks. I can measure the resistance and the windings, can weigh them, and by the way, strength of the magnets, we know that was a bonus in the version 3, how nice and strong the magnets were. Some manufacturers have been using very weak rotors, which are not good when you need a lot of torque indoors, especially out of corners. That was strong, and I was hoping these would be too, and they are. Look at the strength of that, excellent. And this one perhaps even feels stronger. Nice, very nice. But will it cut down the RPM? We know that a very strong rotor, if the motor's not designed properly, can give you low RPM and too much bottom end. Hopefully, if they can get bottom end and high RPM, a bit like the R1 does, and that's why it wins, that's going to be fantastic. I won't find out till I test them. As I say, these are 17.5s, I've got 13.5s as well. I can do all the results and measure them on these charts that I've got here, compare them to previous ones that I've tested. I've got lots of motors I've tested as they come out. We've got the all-important KV, which I will set up on the on the motor analyzer, which I find is sufficient and I can tell if a motor is going to be any good at all from this motor analyzer. Some people think it's too rudimentary, but I disagree, but never mind. I do have the Mini Pro, which I can use as well if necessary to measure all sorts of characteristics which will come up on the computer. Anyway, I won't bore you with all the testing. I'll do things like weighing them, and then I'll take them apart and measure the magnet strength and all that sort of stuff. I'll write it all down, and then I'll continue and show you what I've found. But so far I'm thinking these are going to be very good motors. The Red Rocket 17.5 turn just set up on the analyzer. It's doing a whopping 3,688 kV at 6 amps, which is incredibly fantastic considering the strength of the rotor as well. I mean, if you consider that the class leading motors such as the R1 is doing 3,426, it's exceeded that, and again, it's with a strong rotor. It's not got a weak rotor, so that's just the initial test I've done, and that's much better than I even expected. So the whole thing is looking better and better the more that we do anything. I'll just check out the gold one as well, and that is with the regular timing came out about the same. Average timing 52. And a really nice sensor board in this one, 51, 52, 52. So nothing unusual about the sensor board settings. So it's not going to be an unusual motor to use or gear. That's pretty common for that sort of performance. So let's just look at the M bell itself. There's a mark here. It's a bit only as usual, just a small indicator, and the scale is not that easy to read, unfortunately. But it's about there. When it's about there, it's hard to say. I mean, it's a bit rough. I wouldn't say that was 52. No, it's more like 48. Anyway, so just goes to show you can't go by setting a motor up on the M-bell timing. If you're going to do it properly, you're going to have a proper way of measuring the current. The gold 17.5 turn, well, you wouldn't think they were the same motors. This one's only doing 3106 kV at 6 amps, whereas the red one was doing 3688. Now, it wasn't because the rotors are strong and weak. I'm going to take them out and measure them at the moment. So there's something completely different between this gold motor and the red one, even though superficially they look the same. Timing 52, same as the other one, and not a bad spread, a little bit out, 52, 52, 51, 54. The timing, again, looking at the M bell, you can see the mark in gold pointing at the timing there, which goes 0, 30, 60, same as the other one. It's about the same place, the same position as the red one, to get the same result, but the red one given a massive, the high kV. The red 13.5 turn it's given me a kV of 4175, and that compares, looking at my chart here, class leading R1 V16 version with the strong rotors that they come with now, 4062. Timing 48, 49, 52, so a little bit of a spread, average 50. Gold version of 13.5 turn, just over 4,000 kV, not as much as quite as the red one. Timing 46, 47, 49 on the gold, which gives you an average of 47. Now if you just look at the M bells, I think they probably come out exactly the same. Let's just focus up on the timing of the red and the gold. very similar. It's hard to see on the red one. The actual markings, easy to see it on the gold one. But anyway, they're best past that 45 mark. The all-important winding resistance. The whole thing about these motors is to get the winding as short as possible using the best quality wire. That's why they've done away with the plastic former now. The stack length is as low as the rules allow. It's tight, nice tight windings, good quality wires, good connections. The lower the resistance, the less heat you're going to develop, more power will be used to drive your car forward. And then the lower, the better. But first of all, we've got a very accurate resistance meter here. Have to make sure using the twin contact probes that it's 0 to start with, and then we can measure the resistance of the windings. 0.038, even better. So I just checked all the others as well. Now the lower the resistance, the better. 0.038. So that's the gold one. 0.038. Red one. Is it the same winding? We would expect so. One thing they can't do is make the stack any smaller. Well, I don't know. 0.036. That's incredible. The other one. I can get it on. 0.036. So there is a difference. They've either used better quality wire, which is a possibility, or the construction of it is better. So that was the that's the 17.5 turn gold and black. Looking at the chart for the 17.5s, we now have got the 0.036 compared and 0.038 or 0.036. Let's look at some of the other 17.5s we've looked at previously. For instance, the R1 0.038, which is basically the class leader. So it looks like 0.037 was a Surpass previously. 0.037 for the Reedy. That's incredible. That's now the best winding resistance I've tested. Let's do the 13.5 now. Meters reading 0, close enough. 13.5 red. 0.022. Another winding. 0.021. And the third winding. 0.021. Check the first one again. 0.022 or 21. It's close, isn't it? 0.022 and 2.021s. And the gold version of the 13.5, 22, 22. So it looks like it's going to be 22, which is just a fraction again of the red version. Looking at some previous results, so these are the 0.21, 0.22s. The old Phantom was 25. Let's look at the R1, which we know is brilliant. I've got 2.4 and I've retested another version, only 0.26. The Motive 2.4, 2.5, 2.6s. So this is the best one we've tested so far. The gold one's fine. The red one's a little bit better on the 13.5. So another plus for these motors. By the way, I did check the weights. I found that the two 13.5s weighed the same, I believe. 13.5, we got 155, 155.1. And 17.5s, the gold one weighed 153.1, the red one weighed 1524. So there's a fractionally difference in weight, but reasonably low weights. Looking at the 13.5, 155 grams. It's not the lightest, we know. 150s. The hobby wing, no one's getting near that. 132, incredible. But they did have a lightweight rotor. It's not a very good motor for torque at all. The R1, 151, so slightly lighter there. The Reedy, 146. So it's not a bad weight. It's not the lowest weight, so it can't take the accolade for lowest weight, but it's not heavy either. And that was now the 17.5, slightly different, 153, 152. Looking at some of the others we had, Reedy, 145, R1, 151. So it's almost the same as the R1. Again, it can't possibly beat the hobby wing or even the Reedy, but good weight, not heavy. Taking the gold and red motors apart, these are 17.5 turn ones. Sensor boards appear to be the same, exactly the same, even the same little insulator, same aluminium screw sets there. Case, same. That is where they've saved a lot of weight. Now the stators, I've still got the magnets in them at the moment. There are a number of shims front and back, so if you take them apart, careful you're not going to lose them. You can see the stators are the same length. The red one's nice and shiny, this one's a bit rusty. Let's just look at the tag end first. This has got a black sort of Paxoline, whatever that's made of, and this has got the standard sort of a green one. But they are the same. They both say SP540-V4 printed on them. And the riveting, soldering. Colour of the wires, the actual wires themselves, the wires look the same, very neatly wound on both. But then the other end, that's where the big difference is. Look at this collector, it's huge on this one. There must be losses in here, and this must be one reason why this motor works so well. We've seen this collect before on the R1. It's thick, big, and it must be one of the reasons why this motor performs so well compared to this little thin brass one. Still got the same insulator basically in the back just to stop the wires rubbing on it. Otherwise, not much to say. I don't know whether the laminations are made of the same steel on both. There could be a difference. One thing I've noticed on the sensor board end is on the previous Surpass, with this closed end bell on both, the rotor, the shaft went pressed on the back of the end bell. I think it was a manufacturing thing, because it had a little raised part that the shaft pressed on, and just, I mean, they didn't have to worry about shimming it. It just pressed on and held it in the position. Now that nub, or what do you call it, on the back of here inside is no longer there, and so they have got shims now that they put on, and they shim it up, which means they've got a, if you can shim it close to the sensor board, you normally get a slightly better result on timing than if they've got loads of shims and it's a long way away. Anyway, they've done away with that, so it can be shimmed properly now. There is an R1 collector ring just for comparison purposes. You can see it's very similar, and you can't quite see the thickness, but it's thick as well compared to the little thin one on that one. Interestingly, that colour that I thought, I couldn't work out what it was for the collector plate, is just like a protective piece of film that they left on after manufacture. So that is actually same as the R1, which is aluminium, I believe. Tested the rotor strength. We've got the both these rotors have got the same code on them, and they've got the same size actually engraved. Surpass, it's got the size engraved on it: 12.5, 7.15, 25.2. The 25.2 being the length of the magnetic part, which is a reasonable length. I measured it as well. The longest one I've found, I think, was a motive, which was 26.0 millimeters, and normally 24 is short. So 25.2 is one of the longer ones, which we know gives better performance as well. This is the one out the gold motor. We just measure its Gauss. Negative pole 1537, positive pole 49.6, so it's 97, so it's about 1500. It is a strong rotor. Anything around about 1500 is very strong. The motive, when I tested it before, was a strong rotor, 1500. The R1 was nearly 1500, nearly up to 1491. So that's a very strong rotor. Now the one in the red rotor is exactly the same rotor, same size, same writing, same everything, but it's only minus 1438, 1469. So they're not very consistent on the rotor strength, but anywhere above 1450 is good anyway, and this one will give you good revs. And I checked the weight of the two stators from the 17.5s. Strangely, although this has got the bigger front end, I got the weight of this one was 96.1 grams, and this one was 97.3 grams, so there's a gram over, even though it looks like it should be lighter. Stack length on the red one came out about 19.4, about 19.42, 4.3. I've checked it all the way around, it's very consistent. And on the gold one it was same, 19.44. It's got the epoxy relieved, so you can actually measure it accurately right up to the end. So they're the same stack length, definitely. I was taking apart the two 13.5 turn, the gold and the red. I can't get the body off of here, it's really tight, so I'm not going to force it off. The red one came off okay. Like the 17.5 turn, they are basically the same inside. They got that's got the green, that's got the black. Same sensor boards, but I wondered about the why the shaft sticks out further on the gold one by 2 millimeters longer than on the red one, even though these have both got exactly the same Surpass size and part number engraved on the shaft here. This end, they're the same length, but the other end, this one is much longer. So they've, I don't know if you can see that, they've changed the shaft length, they've reduced it in manufacture. So the gold one the red ones are more recent. They've reduced the length of the shaft, which is very sensible, by a significant amount. So that is why I couldn't work out why they were not the same, but this one is just longer. This is the longer shaft one out of the gold. 1456 minus 1420, so they do vary. Now to check the shorter one from the red. and that's got the really strong one now. So minus 1540 plus 1520. The rotor strengths vary from motor to motor, that's all we can say, and this one is very strong. I don't know whether they select them at the factory or whether it's just random, but we've seen them varying from about 1450 to above 1500, which are both good strengths. The ones over 1500 are going to give you a bit more bottom end, so you can't really tell when you buy one unless you take it apart and measure it, but they both seem to perform very well, especially the red one. Anyway, so fantastic motors, in my opinion. They're going to perform very well. The stack length on the red one, 1943, so it's about the same as the other, around 1944, but on the gold one I've measured it slightly under, 1934. The new Surpass Rocket V4 and V4S motors. Conclusions after I've checked them all over and tested them best I can. And briefly, before I go into the details, yeah, I think these have really come out top, rocketed if you like, to the top, because all the results are showing that it could be the new class leader, passing any other motor I've tested. There's lots of positives about these motors, but briefly, just before I go into those, I just point out a few differences. There are differences between these motors. They're the V4, but this the gold one is V4 and the red one is called the V4S. And there is a difference, the V4S being better than the gold one. They're both very good indeed and very similar, but the S definitely has a few better features. So I'll talk about the S. Virtually everything refers to the gold as well, and I'll point out the few extra features of the S. First of all, let's go over all the good points. Well, it's all nicely open for air cooling, plenty of vents and holes. The weight, they've got the weight down to around about the 150 odd gram mark, which isn't the lowest weight that we've seen, but is about a good weight that all the better motors run about that weight. So, not the lightest, but other things are the best. The Stator, the all-important winding resistance, the lowest I've measured, which means they're using very good wire, very well wound. They use the shortest stator allowed under the rules, which I've always said is what you need. You don't need long stators. And they must be using the best grade of silicon laminations to get this sort of performance. Now the S version has the best collector at the front, which is a big aluminium collector, which seems to give exceptional performance in motors. We've seen it in the R1, for instance. Nice big tags for soldering, riveted so they don't move about. Some gaps, so soldering made easy for you. End valve, 2 sensor ports, makes it easy to fit in all sorts of cars. Even come with aluminium long screws, which you normally have to pay extra for. Shortened shaft, so on most cars where the motor's been moved in now, there was a bit of a problem with the shaft hitting lipos. They've shortened the shaft on the front. That is shorter than was on the gold one, so that's an improvement there. And also the collector at the front is better on the S1. Other features, well, good strong rotor magnet. We know from testing on the track and racing that these days about 1450, 1500 Gauss gives exceptional performance in acceleration and torque. And these I've measured have been about 1500 1450. Now the important test when I measured the performance, well, we know that the strength of the magnet is going to give you exceptional bottom end, and it does, but that normally results in a low kV, volts, revs per volt, but not in this case. The kV is fantastically high as well, which means you've got the best of both worlds. So very torquey motor, very high revving. It's going to work everywhere, big tracks, small tracks, indoors, outdoors. It really is exceptional on performance. Any negatives? Well, they've still got a closed end bell here, and I've still found that the end of the shaft can hit the inside of this little alloy end bell. If you're trying to shim it right up to the sensor board, there's quite a gap to the sensor board, it still does hit the end like on previous ones. Some motors have, like the Phantom, they've got a hole there so that you can see the bearing and the shaft comes through. That's only a negative if you want to take your motor apart and fiddle with it, which I don't advise. And the performance tested is fantastic anyway as it is, so I don't think it's a worry. They come very well shimmed. Some motors come very badly shimmed, unfortunately, including things like the R1 class leading one, which is not that well shimmed. Good looking as well, in my opinion, both, but the red one's very nice. Any other negatives? Not really. I can't see any. It's looks like it's going to be a fantastic performer, and I think it's going to be hard to beat. So there you go, the S version. You can get the standard one as well, and finally they're cheap, cutting out lots of middlemen. They're incredibly cheap compared to some motors. I mean, it's just a win-win situation all around. So that's the conclusions. If you want to see any of the results from the charts that I've done on the 13.5 and the 17.5, I can just show you briefly if you're interested. The sensor board itself, pretty good. Some sensor boards can be way out. The ones I've tested here were quite close, especially this one. In fact, when I tested it a couple of times, they were all equal. So sensor board's good, but the kV is phenomenal. 17.5 especially, it really shows out. 3688 compared to the only other ones that ever came near to that was a much more, and that had a very weak rotor to get that sort of kV. The R1 class leader, 3426 with a similar strength rotor, and so it's past that one. And others, like the Motive, very nice indoor motor, very low kV, so it struggles on big tracks, where this Surpass is not going to struggle at all. 17.5, the lowest winding resistances are measured. Also, I'll point out it's got the slightly longer magnetic part of the rotor, which seems to be a plus point. Some of the better motors now using a slightly longer magnetic part, which seems to give more performance as well, so they've already nailed that. Short shaft, good weight. And that's the 17.5. On the 13.5, again, very good. In fact, the gold and the red one gave very good kVs compared to others, other ones that only came close. The Orca was good. And the R1 itself for about 4,000 for a similar strength rotor. So the 13.5 is going to be up there with all of them. It's got very low resistance winding, so it means it's not going to overheat. It's not going to be a problem with fade. Again, the only negatives is variation in rotor strength. They're obviously not matching them up. They're in the factory, they're just taking them and putting them in. On the track, will you notice? Well, maybe a tiny bit, but I don't think anyone's going to notice. It's not as if they're weak. They're all good strength rotors. You need 1450 to around 1500 over. That one's going to be really torquey. I doubt if you'll notice any difference, and I don't think you need to go through any to select them out because they all come up good. So the 17.5s, 13.5, well, fantastic Blinky motors. I should imagine they'd be brilliant in boosted as well. And I'm sure other wines, like their modified ranges and that, where some of these things aren't so critical, are going to perform fantastically well, just as well in modified and other boosted classes. So that's my conclusion. As far as I'm concerned, I'm going to be using one in my car. I think it's the new leader of the pack, honestly.